welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. My name is Vince Hahn. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobile Coach. Mobile Coach is a chatbot for learning platform, and we're sponsoring today's webinar. I'm thrilled to be joined by some fabulous panelists today. We're going to have a great discussion. I really look forward to it. Just to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started and before I introduce our panelists. The more interactive this is, the better. So as you have questions, please put them in the chat. There's also a Q&A feature that you'll see on Zoom that you can ask, and I'll be monitoring those and making sure we get all your questions taken care of. After the webinar, we'll actually summarize the discussion in an email and send that out with a link to the recording of the webinar. So if you find it interesting, insightful, helpful, please share it with colleagues and friends. So we're happy to try to do our part to move sort of thought leadership forward. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to talk today about what role will technology play with compliance training in a post-COVID world. I'm really excited to discuss the challenges and potential solutions. So I'm going to do an introduction to our panelists. I'm going to read their bios, then I'll let them say hello. First, I will let them, I'm also trying to multitask on Zoom here and get people to turn on their videos here. Introduce Mike Kovacs. He's the technical training manager and digital innovation owner at Siemens Energy. For the past 19 years, Mike has worked at Siemens Energy, teaching and managing technical training. Prior to working at Siemens, he taught high school math and physics. And he holds a BS in Aerospace Engineering with a minor in mathematics from Embry Riddle Aeronautical University. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Vince. Hi, everybody. How is everybody doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
So next, I'm going to introduce Erin Riva. Her passion for learning and safety can be traced back to her days on the playground as she educated her classmates on the best ways to safely line up for a turn on the slide. Now, as an adult education specialist of 20 years, a veteran chatbot and learning tech designer, and CEO and co-founder of SparkBC Technical Training, she continues her quest for the very best ways to tell people what to do. Hopefully you're going to tell us what to do today, Erin. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. It's my favorite thing.
Next, we have Dick Hanna, who's the VP of Learning and Innovation with the Houston Area Safety Council. And in his role with the HASC, he finds new ways to provide effective compliance and safety training to employees of contractors and refinery site owners. Dick holds a BA from Texas A&M University, and an MBA with a focus on e-business and internet technologies. Hi, Dick. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks. And we are expecting one other panelist, and when and if he's able to join, we'll invite. I'll do an intro for Mike as well. So let's get this started. Again, I can't thank you enough for joining us. So we're going to try to keep this panel conversation moving and have it hopefully be full of energy here. So Mike Kovacs, I'm going to start with you. How has Siemens handled safety training amidst COVID, this global pandemic?
Yeah, how we've handled it is actually fairly traditional. So they are still doing either now Microsoft Teams, or we have a program called Circuit, which is our teleconferencing. So they still do it that way. They still do it by also then sending out learning grams and field bulletins and so on. What we've done with Vince and Mobile Coach is use now new technology like chatbots to actually just keep the mindset of safety out there. In a better term, just to keep the remembering of the mindset out there. And so that's where micro learning, then chatbots really have come into play and has been a change for us during this COVID period. So that's where we're transitioning now and are forced to transition because, as Vince has said, this is definitely a, the umbrella standard that we that we have to follow here in the United States, especially in our construction business. And by the way, just so everybody knows, what I help people do is learn how to fix large scale power plants. So steam turbines, gas turbines, nuke, fossil, that's what we do. So that's been the challenge for us, is actually just maintaining the mindset while we're just not connected face to face anymore.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And if people have questions for Mike, any specifics about the dynamics of safety training in the context of Siemens Energy, please put them in the chat. We'll make sure we'll pass those along. Well, thanks. Of course, we're going to focus a lot on how on how COVID's changing things and what things we can expect to persist after the pandemic starts to run its course. But it's interesting to hear what people are doing today. Dick and Erin, I'm interested in your perspective too. Let's start with you, Dick. What are you seeing out there? Because you get to interact with lots of different types of companies. How are they handling safety training in the past few months? What have you seen?
So you're right. We do handle a lot of different companies. We consider them our members since we're a nonprofit training organization. We interact with thousands of members. Usually they're smaller, 500 employees and below. We also have a few that are a couple thousand. So we have a nice mix, and we can see how different types of members are working within this new environment. What we've seen is a lot of people are really scaling back on their training and their training budgets, really deciding, hey, is this training necessary or not? Because they're really holding on to that budget. We've also seen the fear of coming to a centralized place. We're still seeing about 800 to 1,000 people a day. Usually we see 2,000 people a day at this time. And we're happy to be getting those 800, and we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. We've had several very large clients say, we don't feel safe sending our folks there despite everything you're doing. So we're going to wait until things die down a bit. This makes it very difficult for us to provide the basic safety training that they need when they're not even coming in to do it. So we've tried to do some virtual offerings. They've delayed the compliance, the need for that training. But for the most part, we just see a hesitancy to move forward and a great desire to hold on to their money for the moment because they're so scared about the future.
So Dick, does that mean that has your facility stayed open this whole time?
We have. We were considered critical, and you don't want a fire or an explosion in a refinery, particularly during this time. And so this basic safety training had to continue for these employees coming in. What we did over the past couple of months is we were able to find ways to change our processes and procedures to ensure the safety of our trainees. We're doing testing of our employees. We're doing temperature gauge for everyone who comes in, hand washing stations, social distancing, reminders on the floor and all throughout the campus, partitions between computer-based training stations and partitions between trainees within classrooms, doing a lot to keep everyone safe. And what we've seen in the last month are people starting to come back. They're seeing what we've done, they're utilizing what we've done in their own workplaces, and they're starting to see that it's what we've done is keeping them safe while they're here. And so, yes, we have been open the whole time. We've been learning from the events and changing and adapting and overcoming as we go.
So last follow-up question on this, because it's just really interesting. When you say that you've seen companies holding training budgets back, isn't there a component of what they're doing and sending people to your staff required? So how are they handling it when folks are actually, through regulation, they have to be going through this training?
You're exactly right. We see several buckets of training. You have compliance training, which is required. We have site-specific training, which is required by the refineries. And then you have skills and safety training, which are nice to haves. Those nice to haves are gone. They've decided we don't want those. We stopped offering them for a while. We're starting to see some of those start coming back, which is really nice. I was thinking actually of our leadership training. We have a leadership development course that we're very proud of that's focused on our industry. And I didn't think we'd be able to offer it the last 2 months, and we've had full classes. And it makes me think that these owners are holding on to people and they're trying to find ways to keep these people from walking away. And so they're saying, hey, as long as we're paying them, we might as well train them. And so they're sending them to some training like that. The site compliance training. Some of our refineries require that before people come onto their site, they have a specific training. Those, in many cases, not in many, but in some, the refineries have said, we're not going to require this anymore. And then you have your compliance training from OSHA and safety and process safety management compliance training. Those are the ones we're continuing to offer.
Very interesting.
It is.
Thanks, Dick. Erin, how about you? What are you seeing out there?
Well, I think, for the most part, people are really doing well. They're jumping into the technology that they already have and maybe exploring some of the different facets of that technology that were underutilized before. Maybe, for example, a lot of people are using Zoom now, but they're exploring some of the whiteboarding features, the annotation tools, stuff to kind of create that engagement that maybe wasn't so important before when there was lots of human interaction in the building. But what I'm also seeing out there is a lot of set it and forget it. So people are developing these online courses that, cover the new protocols. They talk about, the dangers of COVID and things like this. And then they put in an online course, they push it out and they check that box. There's very little follow-up from what I can see in a lot of these companies in terms of figuring out whether, the behaviors have been adopted, what are people's attitudes towards safety, wearing masks. And as we know, when it comes to things like wearing seatbelts or stopping smoking or texting and driving, it's not about knowing what to do. It's I guess being motivated to make that change, and having that long-term follow-up is really important. That's something, unfortunately, in these times, people are dropping.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. It makes me wonder, Erin, if companies, because traditionally safety training has been job specific, job functions, specific. But now with COVID, there's an awareness of safety just, for the COVID's sake for everybody. Has anyone seen or any of your companies implemented just general COVID related training just for best, keep everybody safe?
Canada, our restrictions are really tight. I think tighter maybe than the United States. In fact, as far as technical training, we were basically put on hold by our regulator to provide any live training. And so all of our clients have moved online or to a webinar format with us. But there are some that prefer the live training and are willing to wait if it is something that can wait.
I should note for folks on the webinar that Erin is from Canada, and so and if you could, so would you say that Canada is more highly regulated than the United States in terms of safety training?
It's hard to say. I think it's just like anything. It's province to province up here or state to state. And our regulator, the one that approves our courses, has sort of decided to take that route. I think it's worked. We've had very few COVID cases up here. That's obviously attributed to not having the ability to meet in large or even small groups at this point in time, and the border being closed and things like that. But we're starting to see that turn around right now. Stores are opening, and I expect in the next month or so that they're going to open the possibility for live training again with restrictions as being before.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mike and Dick, any comment around just broad COVID-related safety training for employees at large? Mike, have you seen anything around there? Oh, sorry, Dick, you raised your hand there.
I was going to say we did create a pandemic-related training regarding COVID-19. We use it actually to augment our safety processes here in-house. And so as a trainee comes in, he's confronted with monitors that are showing this training about what we're doing to keep them safe and what they can do themselves to keep themselves safe in this environment. And then we provide a mobile coach chat number, and they're able to chat directly through your technology to reinforce those messages that they hear on the screen. And so we're using it as a quick training tool that they see as they come into the council, and then they're using your technology to reiterate, reinforce, and create those memories and get those learning objectives transferred over to them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dick. Mike, any comments on that?
Yeah, most of our communication about COVID has been just directly to us through the normal existing historical channels. So emails and, teleconferencing. I have not seen, nor have we developed any specific COVID related trainings or e-learnings. I mean, even because they push it through IT, even our background of our desktops and our laptops automatically change to the 6 rules of COVID, right? Safety, from social distancing to hand washing to, covering your mouth while sneezing and masks and so on. So it's kind of been the normal channels for COVID for us.
Yeah, thank you. Last week I had a conversation with a colleague in Australia, and he made some comment to me that I thought was really interesting. He said that, of course, global pandemic is a terrible thing, and we want everyone to be safe as possible. Stepping back from that, he made the comment that COVID has done more to accelerate the adoption of technology in their company than any CEO or CTO has done in their company's history. And I thought that was a really interesting comment. And he went on to say, and I think that we've all heard chatter around this, where people that maybe were skeptical about online collaboration tools, who have now been forced into that environment, are seeing the efficacy of it. Maybe people who are skeptical about having a stay-at-home work policy, seeing that people can actually be productive working from home. So it's really curious to me. It will be curious to me to see what permanent changes occur after the pandemic sort of goes away, that will persist just in the workplace. So with that principle in mind, what about safety training? I wonder what types of things are gonna, and maybe what technologies have companies been forced to address now with people working from home and social distancing that actually we find are very effective, even when there's not social distancing going to be in place. So this is a question for the panel. What technologies, what technology solutions have you been using? We've talked a little bit about chatbots. We've talked a little bit about whiteboards through Zoom. Anything else that you can share?
I have something. So we've had a virtual reality simulator for welding and for cranes for many years. Sometimes these are hard things to do hands-on. We're also starting to develop more virtual reality simulations to go along with our computer-based training, because we're starting to see that getting the hands-on training that we always want is not always there. And if we can find a virtual reality component that can inch our trainees a little bit closer to hands-on, so as close as you can get to hands-on without hands-on, then we're going to be doing them a service. And so we're starting to do more and more virtual reality. But we see it not as an end-all, beat-all, not the one solution, but as a part of an appropriate mix for a full training solution. We're never going to get all the way away from computer-based training, but if we have computer-based training mixed with pre-test, mixed with virtual reality, mixed with micro-learning or chatbots at the end, you have a greater chance of making sure that you're making that knowledge transfer to the trainees. So I guess my answer to that would be, yeah, we're starting to develop more virtual reality.
Yeah, this is Mike. One of the other technologies, and it's a partner of you, Vince, and Mobile Coach, is the game agency. With the uptick of now virtual happy hours, we are seeing much more need for fun, interactive, and customized activities during those different use cases for Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be. And so we've actually gone into some other verticals within Siemens, some other business units within Siemens, and actually created them activities for this, which also includes chat bots and so on, but also just fun trivia games that they can do through the existing technology of teleconferencing like Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, great gaming.
I would agree. I think one of the most important things right now is to keep that levity, keep that humor. And to that end, I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is really leverage the idea of dirty video. Like, don't be so hung up on the hi-fi, perfect lighting, perfect everything. We want to encourage people to start shooting videos from their home that haven't shot videos before, so that they can share what they know, make it real and as hands-on as possible. Some of the things we're encouraging people to do is to get those chest harnesses and video mounts where you can easily, like $40 from like any tech store, mount your iPhone and you can broadcast what you're doing to anybody in the field. Again, it's one of those things. I wonder whether that's going to continue on after the pandemic's over. These creative ways of bringing people into your space, showing them that hands-on technique without being so cost intensive. So, go to what Dick was saying, I'm a huge supporter of technology. I love it. But one of the boundaries or barriers I've been finding up here is that the VR can be very rigid and expensive. So you invest a lot of money. It can be anywhere from $60,000 to $150,000, depending on the quality. And it's very difficult for a lot of companies up here to justify the investment in that sort of technology when they can maybe get the same learning outcomes through something a little bit more lo-fi and cost effective. So
yeah, I love that comment, Erin, just because also sometimes things change. Well, a lot of the times things change so quickly that you need to be very agile in producing content and having content change. And so if you have a very high standard of production quality, that just makes the agility harder. And I think that, in the days of COVID and Zoom, we're all now accustomed to more dirty video. And even like, we're not as self-conscious about what's in the background, or if we have a dog or a child walking into the screen, where before COVID, we might have been a lot more sensitive about that.
Yeah, I've got a dog at me right now. So
excellent. Trish Yule has a question. Let's pause here and contemplate her question. She asks, are you finding any challenges in labor costs, for example, paying hourly workers to take training, or device and service costs? And the example she gives, some states require companies to pay a percentage of personal device and service if used for work. Any challenges with that that you're seeing?
Well, this is Mike with Siemens. We've got two whammies happening kind of now, and that is not only one is the COVID situation, but also is that Siemens has announced in press release that Siemens Energy that I work for is being carved out of the Siemens umbrella. So the reason why I say double whammy is because costs are now on are being scrutinized from two different fronts. One, the business decision that was made to carve out Siemens Energy last year, and then obviously this year's COVID. So for us, specifically in training, the cost of new technology, the cost of development, and those, as I like to call them, those objections to new features and functions is more of what I am trying to manage and discover and qualify with both my internal and external customers. Are what are the objections that they have in their business model that I need to know to be able to work with. And so like Vince's platform and the mobile coach platform, in the scheme of fixing a large scale power plant, Vince's platform is very economical, especially from the self-authoring, viewpoint. And that's one of the things that it was great to find Vince. I think it's been now 3 years ago that we met Vince at, I can't remember necessarily if it was DevLearn or wherever it was at, whichever conference, but it's a platform that allows us to self-author, and the cost is not something that my organization is objecting to. So going to Erin about we also do VR stuff, and our largest VR cost from my cost center was $198,000, and that has not been something that's been compelling, that has been adopted internally, meaning the people using it, right? Clearly the money was funded to create it, but then people just aren't using it. And so it's for some reason, the actual users, the gamers, the players, the students, whatever you like, employees, they are not engaging with it. So therefore it's, it's a challenge for the future to find the funding for those higher dollar, projects. So it is a struggle. It is something that you have to consider when you go into this.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into the project that I wanted to take a minute to highlight. Mike and his colleague and his team have worked on a chatbot called Zack. I'm going to share my screen here. Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I've got two slides.
Okay.
I've got a slide.
You know me, I don't like being put on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I figured you would. So I've got two slides. I've got a slide that shows some examples of Zack, and we'll have Mike describe what Zack is and how he built it. And then the next slide, I've got a keyword and a phone number for anyone on the call who would like to try out Zack. Mike has graciously offered anyone to be able to try this chatbot out. So, Mike, tell us about Zack and how you built Zack.
Yeah, I was born in the military, but I don't have military experience. I like acronyms and then names for those acronyms. So Zack is, we have our safety culture within all of Siemens is called the zero harm culture. So we created the zero harm culture chatbot, and we created this actually, I think maybe 2 weeks after we came out and had training with Vince and his team in Utah about how to self-author chatbots. And so the idea was, because what we were thinking was at the time was, wow, we really need to keep the mindset open of safety. And this was pre-COVID. This was in February of this year when we had our training. And so we're like, wow, this will be great. A simple chat bot that just sends reminders to people every week. Just a little safety reminder. Wear your shoes, right? Or, if you're going to use a chemical, look at the MSDS sheet. And no matter where you're at in the world. So if you're having your morning coffee, because it sends you between 9 and 10 a.m. every Monday, a little safety reminder. So Zack, Zero Harm Culture Chatbot, or Zack, that's what it was. And we tailored it to be personal. So you do put in your name, and then every week it's like, hey, Mike, hey, here's your safety reminder for this week. And so that's what we created, just to keep the mindset, the zero harm culture that we have out there. And so going to actually to one of the things that was been said here is we're seeing, at least I'm seeing in my email, an uptick of either near misses or first aids or even recordables. And so one of the things that I'll say that I'm sensitive to right now, and I think that the technology of like Zack or chatbots can really be used to correlate how much we're still professing safety stuff out to the workforce, and the behavior of what the workforce then is sending back to us in terms of how they're behaving. And so Zack was created to try to keep that mindset and keep those the reminders out there. And so it's just a basic tool. That's all it is a reminder. It's not anything that's too, how you want to say it, interactive. It's interactive in the very beginning, and then Zack just sends you reminders every week. And it was just something to keep safety out there in the open, because that's one of the beautiful things about the mobile coach platform is it can be autonomous. What I like to say sometimes is, in trainings, mobile coach chatbot is kind of like my robot. I can design it, then it just let it go. And Zack is a 52-week experience. So every Monday for a year, Zack is going to send reminders out to people. So, yep, that's Zack.
So, Mike, Trisha's asking, how do people access, what channels have you turned on for Zack? She's asking through the mobile phone, through Teams, through other channels.
Yeah, very good. So right now we're doing mobile phone, so SMS texting, but that has been a conversation that Vince and I have had. There was also a comment about technology and what's new and what has happened in COVID. And it's not technology, but it is platform. We were going to move later after the Siemens Energy carve out to Microsoft Teams from the program called Circuit, but that got pushed out much earlier, right in the beginning, because Circuit couldn't handle the extra bandwidth of Siemens, such a huge company, all of a sudden using one platform. So I will be talking to Vince more about implementing in other places. The other thing is that we use the learning management system SABA for our learning management system. So there will be other integration because again, we are seeing an uptick of objections to chatbots because we're all just getting inundated with messaging, not just chatbots and texts, but just texts and emails about so much stuff. And so we've actually had people stop or quit Zack just because they have told us it's just too many text messages right now.
Mm. Yeah, so right now, for those of you in the US, this is a US-based number for you to try out. Try out Zack. I'm sure Mike would love for you to try it out and give him some feedback on it. As he just alluded to, you can opt out at any time by just texting stop. Mike, are there plans to make Zack global accessible, not just for the US?
Yeah, and I've reached out to your team about international. It actually works international. We do have international folks on it. But obviously it's then an opt-in, opt-out for the individual based on their, data rates and so on. So, but that's why we have the +1 there for our international colleagues and stuff, so they know that it's a U.S. number. One of the other adoptions of the Zack that was then when it was shown and it was objected to, but then they were like, well, could we do this? And this was where our field service organization wanted to send out direct messaging through the mobile coach platform. So we demoed the technology and then they started to understand the mobile coach technology, and then they started, because they were now educated, right, they started to ask features and functions questions. We got trained with Vince's team on how to do direct messaging. So now it's not even real, it's not an autonomous chat bot that is scripted. It is used for real time messaging out there of it's very specific, like of when we have an incident and they're going to have a safety stand down meeting. Now we can send out direct message and say, remember, check your email, safety stand down meeting. And it's a reminder tool, but it's a direct messaging reminder tool.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. For those of you that I stopped sharing my screen. So if you didn't capture that phone number and keyword and would like it, we'll send it out again after the webinar is over. Dick, I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the chatbots that you've created there. Can you just elaborate a little bit more? How are you using chatbots?
So we're using it as a reinforcement engine. We realize that we're never going to get away from our primary deliverable of computer-based training or instructor-led training, but that there are certain aspects of that training that can produce a bit of ennui in our students and our trainees, where they start tuning this out, where certain aspects of the training make it difficult for them to pay attention when we need them to. And some of this is very important stuff. We try to find ways to engage them during the class, but also engaging them after the class, I think, is just as important, particularly if you can fine tune it correctly and figure out exactly what the learning objectives that you want to reinforce are. And so one of the better examples that we're working on right now is we provide 40-hour HAZWOPER training. Imagine that you go through a full day of safety training like that, your brain gets very full, and you do that for 5 days and you're almost overwhelmed with the amount that you've learned. And the fire extinguisher training that you may have hit on Monday, by Friday, is so far in your past that you've forgotten everything about it. But imagine that on the next Monday, you get a chatbot alert that says, hey, what did PASS stand for? Remember we went over PASS with fire extinguishers? What's that stand for? Or you ask, what's the A in PASS stand for? Or you hit them with little nuggets of information that help reinforce those learning objectives and make them retrieve the memory in their mind and reinforce that learning. That's really what we're trying to do with your technology right now, is identify exactly what we want them to keep. Well, we'd rather them keep everything, but we know that's not possible. But what can we help them keep? What are those critical things that we really want them to know? And then hit them with that after the fact, so we stop the forgetting curve from occurring, and we actually implant the memory and make it stronger in their minds.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what's really interesting about how you're using it, Dick, for reinforcement is that you'll gain some insight on what people are asking for and what are they forgetting, what is coming up in their minds that you want to try to reinforce and help them with. So I think that's a critical part of it as well. Now, Erin, you've had some experience with chatbots in the past. Can you describe how you've used chatbots to support safety training?
Absolutely. And in fact, we were using it for our field safety representatives in the electrical trade. So these are the master electricians. And one of the things that we were curious about is we were seeing very low rates of incident reporting from these individuals, and we wanted to know why. So we provide this sort of safety training, where to go, what to do, how to report, why it's important, what the statistics look like, etc. And then what we did is we implemented this chatbot. And what we started seeing is not only, how many, in the last month or two, have you witnessed any incidents or any unsafe situations or hazards, but did you report it? And if you didn't report it, then why? And then what I loved about your product, Vince, was that when you started seeing some data trending in a certain direction, we were able to tweak the back end of the chatbot and dig deeper into those questions that were sort of curious and popping up for us. So I think that the fact that your product is so nimble and responsive is such a great quality, and really found it useful. So in our situation, we were looking at evaluation and behavior change and attitudes towards safety.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Vincent, could I interrupt real quick too, to touch on what Erin was just talking about and what Mike was talking about? In a previous position, we created a micro-learning system that was similar to what you've done, but yours is far easier to manage and to administer. And what we created was connectivism within the organization. We had 90 locations spread out across the entire nation. And what I found was that a location on the East Coast may have heard about an incident on the West Coast, and they got it all wrong. The detail, it was like a game of telephone. They thought there'd been a fatality or a horrible reportable, and actually it had just been a spill, because by the time it got to the East Coast, it was way off. And once we implanted this capability within the organization, what we found was we were able to connect the leaders within the organization and be able to transmit information back and forth much quicker. So if we had a safety incident and we wanted to retrain the leadership of the entire organization, you could leverage a system like this to not only identify and discuss what the problem was, but to also send out the investigation and the what you need to do in the future, and how you need to change your job process to make sure it doesn't occur to you. And so this idea of creating a connected group, an organization of educators is really unique.
That's great insight. Thank you, Dick. Well, we're at time. I think there's a lot of other interesting things to talk about, but we will wrap up. I can't thank you enough, Mike, Dick, and Erin, for joining. I'm going to give each of you a minute just to, if you have any closing remarks or comments, but to also, if people want to connect with you, let us know how they can connect with you. So why don't we go Erin, Dick, and Mike in that order?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, it was great being on a panel with you gentlemen. It was nice to meet you. I just want to share too, I think one of the things about Vince's product that I would like to see happen is a little bit more storytelling, leveraging the ability to push out information, like Mike was saying, to people in your industry, related to stories that are recent, that are happening, that are motivating. They can be short videos that are shot, by people in the company, or they could be news stories that motivate. It could be an incident that happened, as we mentioned before. I would love to see people leveraging that a little bit more, whether it's using that chatbot or their agile content in their own company. For those of you that don't know, SparkBC is a technical training company. We specialize in safety and trades-based program and course development. If you're interested in getting a course or product developed, give us a call or contact us at sparkbc.ca.
So I used to work for a contractor, and recently I've come on board with Houston Area Safety Council. And one of the greatest benefits I'm seeing here is the ability to test things out on behalf of our members, so that our contractors don't have to go out and spend a ton of money on VR. We can do it for them, and then we can also do a study to determine just how effective it is. We're actually running our VR in tandem with non-VR offerings, so we can determine just how effective it is and whether or not it's worth your money. And I like the fact that we get to try that with chatbots as well, because now we can test out Vincent's technology and determine just how effective it is and whether or not it will work for your organization as well. So it's a really cool environment I find myself in. And right now, I know there's a question in our question and answer bucket here about whether or not organizations are able to keep up with demand or being flexible enough. I've found that a lot of companies right now are bending over backward to do whatever organizations are hoping for them to do. You can find some really good deals out there and some really aggressive people who are trying very hard to keep people safe. So I appreciate coming on the panel, and really enjoyed talking to all of you and being able to share this with everyone.
Thanks, Dick. Mike?
Yeah, so from the panel, thank you, panelists. I've actually made some notes here, and I just want to, I guess, kind of reiterate from a Siemens perspective about post-COVID and technology, especially the mobile coach chatbot platform. So, from Erin, I really like the idea of using technology in post-COVID for data gathering, for finding out what are the issues out there, what are the concerns out there. And so that's one of the things in post-COVID. The other thing in post-COVID that I got from Dick then is really using this more for refresher training, because we're still really focused on the big stuff, our development programs that last 1 year, or our instructor-led training, or the one-time events, rather than also focusing on refresher training. And then my input is to really use this technology for these new use cases that are out there, about providing chatbots, other technology just for meetings or events. I mean, why can't we develop a chatbot or some type of technology to better present either before a meeting, during a meeting, or after a meeting, rather than just having PowerPoint slides? So I think the technology's out there for real engaging stuff out there. And then finally, I go by an alias. So if you want to find me in Siemens, the easiest way to do it is to email to joseph.kovacs@siemens.com. So there's a whole story there. And when we chat by email, I'll tell you why it's Mike and not Joseph. So, but I really do appreciate this, Vince. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Dick. Thanks, Erin. And thanks to all of you that have joined our panel discussion today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll summarize the major points in an email along with a link to this webinar. So feel free to share it, and encourage all of you also to try out Zack, the chatbot, courtesy of Mike at Siemens. So thank you all very much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Be safe, be healthy. Take care, everybody.